She was just watering her roses on a quiet Sunday when an angry stranger pulled up and accused her of trespassing. Moments later, 911 was called. But when the police arrived, what they discovered stunned everyone. A peaceful morning turns into a shocking confrontation that reveals prejudice, truth, and an unexpected twist no one saw coming. The sun hung low over the sleepy suburb of Algés, just outside Lisbon, casting a golden warmth across the rows of pastel-colored houses lining Rua das Flores. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour where the world seemed to slow down, where the hum of distant traffic blended with the rustle of leaves in the gentle spring breeze. In the front yard of number 17, a black woman in her mid-30s knelt beside a bed of roses, her gardening gloves streaked with soil. She wore faded denim overalls over a simple white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and a pair of wireless earbuds nestled in her ears. Her name was Amara Diaz, and the roses, deep reds and soft pinks, were her quiet pride. Amara hummed softly to the music, a Portuguese fado tune that carried a bittersweet melody, her hands moving with care as she pruned a wilting bloom. The sunlight caught the sweat on her brow, turning it into tiny beads of light. To anyone passing by, she was a picture of calm, a woman at peace in her small corner of the world. The street was quiet, save for the occasional bark of a dog or the laughter of children playing soccer a few blocks away. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew each other, or at least pretended to, with its tidy lawns and wrought iron fences. But beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, something simmered. Amara felt it every day, though she'd grown skilled at pushing it to the back of her mind. It was in the way Senora Clara from number 12 would glance at her from across the street, her lips pursed as if she'd tasted something sour. It was in the way the postman, João, always seemed to hesitate before handing her the mail, his eyes flickering with something unspoken. Amara wasn't naive. She'd lived in Portugal for over a decade, having moved from Angola as a young woman chasing a better life. She'd built a career as a nurse, bought this little house with its overgrown garden, and turned it into a home. Yet, no matter how many roses she planted, or how many smiles she offered, she was still the other to some. That afternoon, as she worked, a shadow fell across the roses. Amara looked up, pulling one earbud out, and saw a teenage boy standing on the sidewalk. He was lanky, with tousled brown hair and a backpack slung over one shoulder, probably 16 or 17. She recognized him vaguely as one of the kids from the next street over, though she didn't know his name. "Hey," he said, his voice casual but edged with something sharp. "Nice flowers." "Thanks," Amara replied, brushing her hands on her overalls as she stood. She offered a small smile, the kind she'd perfected over the years, friendly but guarded. "They take a lot of work." The boy nodded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Yeah, I bet. My mom says you're really into this stuff. Says it's all you do out here." Amara's smile faltered slightly, but she kept her tone light. "Well, it keeps me busy. Better than sitting inside all day, right?" He smirked, and for a moment she thought he might leave it at that. But then he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're from Africa, right? Like, originally?" There it was, the question she'd heard 1,000 times, always laced with the same curiosity, the same subtle jab. She nodded slowly. "Angola. Been here a long time, though." "Cool," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. He glanced at the house, then back at her. "Just funny, you know. Seeing someone like you in a place like this doesn't really fit." Amara's stomach tightened, but she kept her face steady. "Doesn't fit?" she echoed, tilting her head. "How's that?" The boy shrugged, kicking at a pebble on the sidewalk. "I don't know, just doesn't. You don't look like you belong here." The words hung in the air, blunt and unapologetic. Amara had heard worse, far worse, but there was something about the casual cruelty of youth that stung deeper. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a car horn blared a few houses down and the boy's head snapped up. "Gotta go," he muttered, already turning away. "See ya." He jogged off, leaving Amara standing there, the pruning shears still in her hand. She watched him disappear around the corner, then let out a slow breath. The sun was still shining, the roses still blooming, but the warmth felt distant now. She slipped the earbud back in and knelt down again, her fingers trembling slightly as she returned to her work. That evening, as the sky turned a bruised purple, Amara sat on her porch with a glass of wine, replaying the encounter in her mind. She wanted to brush it off, to tell herself it was just a kid being a kid. But it wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. The next morning, she'd wake up, tend her garden, and go to her shift at the hospital, saving lives like she always did. And still, to some, she'd be the woman who didn't belong. But something was about to change. Across the street, in the dim glow of Senora Clara's living room, a plan was forming, one that would drag Amara's quiet life into a storm she never saw coming. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that made Alger feel like a postcard. Amara woke early, as she always did, slipping into her routine with the precision of someone who'd learned to find comfort in order. She brewed coffee, strong and black, the way her father used to make it back in Luanda, then stepped outside to check her roses. The air smelled of dew and earth, and for a moment, she let herself forget the boy's words from the day before. She knelt by the flower bed, inspecting the buds, her earbuds playing a soft jazz playlist this time. Routine was her shield, and she wore it well. But across the street, behind the lace curtains of number 12, Senora Clara was watching. At 62, Clara Almeida was a fixture in the neighborhood, a widow with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Her house was a shrine to the past, filled with faded photographs and porcelain figurines, and she carried herself with the air of someone who believed she owned more than just her property. To Clara, Amara's presence on Rua das Flores was a quiet affront, a crack in the veneer of what she called proper Portuguese life. She'd never said it outright, not to Amara's face, but her glances and muttered comments to neighbors told the story well enough. That morning, Clara wasn't alone. In her cramped living room, sipping tea from chipped cups, sat two others, João, the postman, and Margarita, a plump woman in her 50s who ran the corner bakery. The three of them had known each other for decades, bound by a shared history and an unspoken agreement that Alger belonged to people like them. White, Portuguese, rooted. Amara, with her dark skin and foreign accent, was an outsider in their eyes, no matter how long she'd lived there or how well she spoke the language. "She's out there again," Clara said, peering through the curtains. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. "Every day, like she's putting on a show." João shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his fingers tapping the armrest. "She's just gardening, Clara. Doesn't bother anyone." Clara's lips thinned. "Doesn't bother you, maybe. But I see the way people look at her. The kids talk. That boy yesterday, Paulo, he said it himself. She doesn't fit." Margarita nodded, brushing crumbs from her lap. "He's right, you know. My customers mention it sometimes. They don't say much, but you can tell. It's strange having her here." João frowned, but he didn't argue. He'd delivered Amara's mail for years. Bills, letters from Angola, the occasional package, and she'd always been polite, even kind. But he couldn't deny the whispers he'd heard, the way some neighbors clammed up when her name came up. It wasn't hate, exactly, just a quiet unease that festered in the gaps between words. Clara leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "We need to do something. She's too comfortable. Buys that house, plants her flowers, walks around like she owns the place. It's not right." "What are you suggesting?" João asked, his voice wary. "Nothing drastic," Clara replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Just a little push. Make her see this isn't her place. She'll leave on her own." Margarita raised an eyebrow. "Like what? You can't just run her out." Clara smiled, a thin, cold thing. "Oh, I won't. People will. We start small. Rumors, a few complaints. The housing association's been itching for a reason to tighten rules. A little noise, a little pressure, and she'll go." João hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If it's subtle, maybe. But nothing illegal, Clara." "Of course not," she said smoothly. "Just neighbors looking out for the neighborhood." By noon, the plan was in motion. Clara drafted a letter to the housing association, claiming Amara's garden was an eyesore, too wild, too unkempt, a violation of some vague bylaw. Margarita agreed to spread word at the bakery, hinting that Amara was standoffish, unfriendly, maybe even hiding something. João would keep an eye on her comings and goings, reporting anything that could be twisted into suspicion. It was petty, spiteful, and cloaked in the language of concern, but to them, it felt justified. Meanwhile, Amara finished her gardening and headed to the hospital for her shift. She worked in the ER, a job that left little room for self-pity. That day, she stitched up a teenager's leg after a bike accident, comforted an elderly man with a broken hip, and smiled through it all. But when she got home that evening, a letter waited in her mailbox, an official notice from the housing association, demanding she address concerns about her property within 30 days. She stood in her kitchen, the letter trembling in her hands, and felt the weight of it all crash down. This wasn't just about roses. It was about her, the color of her skin, the sound of her voice, the life she'd dared to build. For the first time in years, Amara wondered if she'd made a mistake staying in Algés. But she wasn't one to run, not yet. The days following the housing association's letter were a blur for Amara. She read it over and over, the words eyesore and non-compliance burning into her mind. Her roses, an eyesore? She'd spent years coaxing them to life, learning their rhythms, turning a patch of neglected dirt into something beautiful. It wasn't just an attack on her garden. It was an attack on her. She knew who was behind it, or at least suspected. Senora Clara's icy stares had grown bolder lately, and the whispers from the bakery had reached her ears through a co-worker who lived nearby. Algés, her quiet refuge, was turning against her. But Amara wasn't one to crumble. She'd survived worse, leaving Angola at 20, navigating a new country alone, clawing her way through nursing school while working nights. This was a fight she could face. She just needed a plan. The next morning, she called in a favor. Her friend Sophia, a junior lawyer who'd grown up in Lisbon's tougher neighborhoods, came over with a bottle of Vinho Verde and a notepad. Sophia was sharp, no nonsense, and fiercely loyal. Over glasses of wine on Amara's porch, they dissected the letter. "It's flimsy," Sophia said, tapping the paper. "No specific violations, just vague complaints. They're fishing. You've got rights here, Amara." "I know," Amara replied, her voice steady but tired. "But it's not just the letter. It's the why. They don't want me here." Sophia's eyes softened. "Then we make them deal with you. You're not going anywhere." The plan was simple but bold. Amara would fight the complaint head-on, submit a formal response, citing her property's compliance with every rule, and demand a public hearing. Sophia would dig into the housing association's bylaws, looking for leverage. But Amara added her own twist. She'd turn her garden into a symbol. If they hated her roses, she'd make them impossible to ignore. Over the next week, she worked tirelessly. She expanded the flower bed, planting more roses, bright yellows, fiery oranges, until her yard blazed with color. She added a small bench and a sign. Community garden, all welcome. It was a quiet rebellion, an invitation to anyone who'd see her as more than the outsider. At the hospital, she mentioned it casually to colleagues, knowing word would spread. Soon, a few neighbors, mostly younger families and a retired couple from down the street, stopped by, curious. Some brought cuttings. Others just sat and chatted. Amara smiled, offered tea, and let them see her for who she was. Clara, João, and Margarita watched it unfold with growing unease. The Housing Association hearing was set for 2 weeks later, and their subtle push was backfiring. The garden wasn't just thriving, it was drawing people in. Clara doubled down, spreading rumors that Amara was disrespecting tradition, while Margarita hinted at the bakery that the garden was a front for something shady. João, though, wavered. He'd seen Amara at work once, rushing a bleeding child into the ER, and the memory gnawed at him. The hearing arrived on a rainy Tuesday evening, held in the community center's drab meeting room. Amara stood at the front, dressed in her nurse's scrubs after a long shift, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. The room was packed, Clara and her allies on one side, Amara's supporters on the other. Sophia presented the case. The complaint was baseless, the garden legal, the accusations absurd. Amara spoke next, her voice calm but firm. "I came to Algés to build a life," she said, meeting Clara's glare. "I work hard. I save lives. I grow flowers. If that's an eyesore, I don't know what home means to you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The retired couple clapped. Clara's face reddened, but she stood. "This isn't about flowers," she snapped. "It's about who belongs. We've lived here forever. She's a neighbor," João cut in, surprising even himself. He stood, avoiding Clara's glare. "I deliver her mail. She's never hurt anyone. Maybe we're the problem." The room fell silent. Clara sat, stunned. The association chair, a balding man named Señor Lopez, cleared his throat. "No violations found," he said. "Case dismissed." It wasn't a grand victory. No apologies, no sudden harmony. Clara stormed out, Margarita trailing behind. But as Amara walked home under her umbrella, a few neighbors joined her, chatting about the roses. João lingered back, then called out, "Sorry for, you know." She nodded, not trusting herself to say more. The next day, her garden bloomed brighter, and a new visitor, a teenage boy with tousled hair, stopped by. It was Paulo, the kid from before. He shuffled awkwardly, then muttered, "They're cool. The flowers. Didn't mean what I said." Amara smiled, handing him a rose. "They're for everyone. Take it." He did, and as he walked away, she sat on her bench, the sun breaking through the clouds. Algés wasn't perfect. The stairs wouldn't stop overnight, and Clara's resentment would linger. But Amara had carved her space, rooted it deep. She'd stay, and maybe, just maybe, others would grow around her. The story didn't end there. It couldn't, because across Europe, across the world, others like Amara faced their own Claras, their own quiet wars. And in every bloom, every stand, there was a question: who decides who belongs?